What's poppin', people? It's Dante. This morning we're going to be talking about my ideas about street photography with a documentary approach and what that means to me, right? You know, you hear these labels: street photography, documentary photography, photojournalism, all of the different genres of photography. But, I think all of these kind of ideas are weird at the end of the day, but I do think there is something to say about discussing my approach as a documentary approach when I go out there and photograph. And I've got to say, right off the bat here in the intro of this video, that this is something that I needed to adopt. I learned how to interact on the streets very naturally, out of necessity. As when I started street photography in a more serious way, I was actually in Baltimore in university at the time. And, well, because of the community that I was photographing in, as an outsider on the inside, in one of the most dangerous neighborhoods in West Baltimore, in the country, right? This is one of the most dangerous neighborhoods in the country. I wasn't going to walk around like I'm in downtown Manhattan with a flash, just, snapshotting strangers, right? So this is something that I learned intuitively. This isn't something I was taught. This is something that just came through street smarts, through going out there and interacting in the world. And yeah, I just want to emphasize that right off the bat, because you hear these notions about street photography, documentary photography, blah, blah, blah. I think all of the labels are kind of foolish at best, but I do find it interesting to describe my approach this way, as it makes most sense. All right, so let's just break into the video. So we got here snapshot of me with the Jolin brothers in Jericho. You can see me interacting with the people here in Jericho, and yeah, I become very intimate with my approach. And so today we're going to be discussing that approach and how I see this approach to street photography in a nuanced way, where not necessarily am I always a fly on the wall just taking pictures, but I integrate myself within the scene in order to come home with a more compelling street photo. And so what that means is, at this particular scene, I had permission to photograph. And so when I was photographing in Baltimore and I was just getting started with my street photography, this was the first photograph that resonated with me and I deemed to be a keeper photo. And so what happened was, I was walking around West Baltimore, observing the light. It was golden hour, and I noticed some people that were playing basketball. And so I approached the scene, and just think about it. You're an outsider in the community. Am I going to go up to a basketball game going on and just start taking pictures and not talk to the people? Like, this is why I think people that have rigid rules about street photography are so foolish, because there's so many nuances and complexities to how you can interact with the world and humanity. And so for me, as an outsider, I engaged with this scene. I said hello. I introduced myself. I'm a student down the street. I attend this university. I'm making photographs. And then I had access to make pictures and have a lot of opportunities here to work the scene. And so this was something that came to me intuitively and quickly. This is something that was natural to me, right? I wasn't going to be some dummy, walking around Baltimore with my camera on my neck, just taking pictures. Like, do you know how stupid I would be if I were to just walk around this neighborhood and just start taking pictures? I mean, seriously. For instance, as this scene unfolded and as the basketball game ended, I turned to my left and we have a fight break out. Okay, we have a fight breaking out. They're gambling. There's money on the ground. There's a fist fight. I'm there with my camera, snapping a photo, and I dip. I say thank you, and I go home. And as soon as this ended, as soon as this fight broke out, I went right home with my SD card, plugged it into my laptop, and imported the photos. But I stayed there, and I was patient, and I was working the scene, and I was integrated within that scene as I photographed. And that's how you can become intimate and close to make the photos. It's simply through body language, through communication skills, right? Through your personality and your charisma. And, I think that when you're approaching the streets with this documentary approach, the point is you're fluid. You're a fly on the wall. You're making candid photos. You integrate yourself in a scene. You ask for permission, and then you can make pictures while they're not aware of you with the camera, which becomes more interesting and allows you the access to make more compelling imagery. And so that was the first introduction to me utilizing this approach, for me to start my journey, if you will, right? This was the step that I took to then continue on and make more pictures this way, because I realized after that moment, after that fight broke out, after I came home with the photo of the basketball scene, that I need to approach the streets differently. I'm not in my hometown in Philadelphia. I can't just run around the streets and snap photos. And so the difference that I find to be between street and documentary photography is that, with street photography, of course, there's minimal interaction. You're sort of just quickly making these spontaneous photographs. But with documentary photography, you're actually spending an extended period of time in a community. You're building relationships with people, which then allows you to capture these deeper narratives and make photographs that are much more intimate and, I believe, stronger than just remaining this fly on the wall. And so I think that the idea is to combine the approach of being a documentarian, being a documentary photographer, with the approach being fluid, where I'm not afraid to spend a lot of time at a scene. I'm not afraid to interact and to say hello and to chat with people, and then have myself integrated within a community over time through building these relationships to then become the fly on the wall, where then they know that, oh, Dante's just the guy with the camera now, and he can just go around, he's just there, and he's just taking pictures, and people act naturally while you're photographing things. And this, to me, is the beauty of street photography. It's the fluidity of the ways in which you can approach the streets. I don't think that there are any rules or guidelines that you must follow, like, oh, don't talk to people. That's just weird. It's like, dude, we're humans, and we're documenting life, and we're documenting humanity. And so I believe the fluidity of a street photographer is critical to consider, and to not get yourself bogged down or boxed into one genre or one way of working. And so you can see me on an adventure there on a canoe in Zambia, Africa, with my X Pro 2. And so, yeah, this corner in Baltimore, when I first got started, I would enter the West Baltimore neighborhood along Pennsylvania Avenue. And I remember there were a couple of bus stops, and this one bus stop in particular, I would oftentimes hang out at. I always found this choke point, this area where there's lots of action. There's students coming home from school. There's people waiting for the bus, coming home from work. There was something about this bus stop that had potential. And so right off the bat in my journey in Baltimore, I would walk over and over and over again to this location and just stand around, hang out, chat with locals. The guy smoking the cigarette, I would actually buy a cigarette from one of the guys on the corner. Like, they sell loose ones, and I would just buy a loose one. I'd buy a loosie. I don't even smoke cigarettes, but I would buy one and chill with the cig and just kind of blend in. Like, you pick up certain street smarts when you're out there actually practicing, right? This comes through actually being out there on the front lines of life, engaged with the world, When you're on the streets, you must be fluid. You must approach things naturally and instinctively. I decided to constantly revisit this particular bus stop in order for me to become trusted. They understand I'm a student. They understand why I'm making pictures. And so now when I approach these scenes, I was able to make photographs how I like to, as a fly on the wall, as a bystander, in a community, as an outsider. And so I made a lot of photographs of this bus stop, and this is one of the images in particular that I find to be compelling. And so throughout my journey, I've utilized the Instax camera as a way for me to build trust. And so when I first started to travel and make photographs, I actually started to travel all throughout the West Bank. And so I'm going from West Baltimore to the West Bank. And so danger is something that I certainly am intrigued by. And so when I went to the new university in Jerusalem and I was studying abroad there, I decided to bring along with me an Instax camera. And so this became the way in which I gained trust in communities. And so I always found that by engaging with people in a new place with an Instax camera opened up the doors, both literally and metaphorically, where I could make a picture of somebody with an Instax camera and gift it to them, and they have this smile on their face, and I'm building trust, and we're having fun, and it's playful, and it's not so serious, breaking the ice and building this relationship so that I can come back time and time again and make new pictures with my camera, with my Fuji or my Ricoh or whatever I was using at the time, to come home with my candid moments. And so essentially, the Instax camera, the camera itself is the passport. It's the key that will unlock the doors to the possibilities of you making pictures on the streets. And so the most practical suggestion I have for anybody who wants to travel and make work like this in a more documentary approach on the streets is to carry an Instax camera as a way for you to break the ice and to gain trust to then have access to make photographs. And so that is something that I wanted to sort of discuss right off the bat, because this is really important for me in my process, is gaining trust, building relationships. I mean, this is how you come home with more compelling images. And in order for me to make pictures like this in Baltimore, as another practical suggestion, I was using the Ricoh GR2 at the time, and I didn't have the camera visible on my neck. You know, the camera was so easy because it was in my pocket for me to kind of just walk around naturally, not looking like some tourist on a safari in a new community, right? So the Ricoh is a great camera for anybody who wants to make photos like this as well. And I found that by having the camera in my pocket, I was able to sort of fluidly engage within these scenes. However, once I traveled to Israel, I decided to pick up a Fujifilm. I just naturally decided, I don't know why, I thought, okay, I'm gonna take the next step in my journey. Let me, go to the next level, get a real camera, right? I figured I need a camera with a lens or something. Like, I don't know why, but I did so, and then eventually carried that camera with me throughout my journey. But here we have some photos from Jericho, gaining trust, gaining access, getting close. You know, this to me is what it's all about. This photograph came with time spent. You know, after building relationships in the community, I was able to become more intimate with the scenes I photographed. And so I just came out of the mosque. I was praying with the community. And after a prayer, we came outside and they started drinking tea and coffee and smoking cigarettes and chilling and greeting each other openly. And I was simply there and prepared with my camera. You know, I was sitting on the chairs in this scene. I was hanging out with a group of men. I was at this scene. I was there. I was present when I pressed the shutter, right? I wasn't walking around, snap, and then running away. You know, I think street photography is kind of silly. And so what this will do over time when you're interacting with a new community is it will allow you to get closer and closer to the story. And so when you return to the same location time and time again, you can integrate yourself with the local routines. Like I said, going into the mosque and praying and spending time outside of the mosque and drinking coffee and hanging out and simply getting closer to the story. Through building these relationships, you can have yourself more opportunities to make the photographs you deem to be strong and successful. And for me, strong relationships led to strong photographs. And so here's a photo of me with this woman inside her home. And I oftentimes found myself entering homes, you know, getting close, getting intimate, and making photographs in this way that I believe is what I was ultimately seeking to achieve. You know, I wasn't necessarily trying to make photos in these new communities that were only reliant on composition and the light and, you know, the basic elements of what makes a street photo in a way. But I was trying to get closer and closer to create more in-depth imagery that resonated with me and told a story. And so this was the approach that I used to make these kind of photographs. And so by building relationships, you can make more meaningful work. And so this man, Amaz, in the photo there, as I'm smiling with that compact camera. Yeah, actually somebody gave me a compact camera. They sent it to me via mail so that I could teach people in the community photography. And so me and Amaz would go around, and at this moment I was showing him a compositional technique by using the mirror just as like a fun example photo for him. And yeah, I wound up just giving him the camera as we would go around together. It was really fun. And so Amaz was my kind of key community member that would guide me throughout my journey in Zambia. And so I integrated myself within the Bemba tribe for a year as a Peace Corps volunteer. And so if somebody wants to make more in-depth documentary stories as a photographer, you know, if you're interested in street and documentary photography, I highly recommend the Peace Corps. I highly recommend volunteering generally. Like, for instance, in Jericho, I spent so much time there, and I was volunteering on my own, just living with a Palestinian family in a youth hostel, you know, and I would prepare their beds in the morning and sweep and give tours to tourists and have my camera with me and photograph throughout the day and get to have meals with a Palestinian family each morning and every night, and become integrated within the community. Similar to my experience in the Peace Corps, where I participated in the daily life. I visited the church every Saturday at the Seventh-day Adventist Church, and I build these relationships that ultimately allow me to capture these authentic moments. And so by volunteering and being integrated within a community, you can have this access that will allow you to make the work that you're looking to make, essentially. And so Amaz, shout out to you. This guy was the best. This guy, I think, was my best friend, ultimately. Like, every single morning would come to my house in the morning, and we would lift weights, we would work out, we'd make meals together, we would cook together, we would have coffee together, and he would ride on this boat with me. He would take me on his tour. He worked as a delivery man. He would deliver rice to local villages, and he would ride the boat around. And so during his time off from work, he decided to take me out this one day to ride the boat around and just show me around the lake. And he was washing his face in this moment that I pressed the shutter, just being playful as I was making photographs at the scene. And just a lot of fun you can have. And it's so much more joyful when you have relationships with the people that you photograph, I believe. I think this is where the magic really happens with photography. It's through building relationships and getting closer and closer to humanity. And so ultimately, Amaz and I experienced so much together, and we would bike together to nearby villages, and this is a different village, but it took maybe an hour, and we biked for an hour, and we would visit this village in particular because he had some friends there. There were more markets there that we could purchase things from, like fresh produce and things. And we would hang out and play pool. They had this pool table inside one of the little homes, and just spend a lot of time together, and then ultimately have a nice meal together. There were some restaurants there, and then we would have some fun, and I would have opportunities along that journey of me just having fun and being engaged and hanging out with this man and just being integrated within these communities to make these kind of photos. And so it comes through play, it comes through time spent and building relationships. And so for me, honestly, photography has nothing to do with photography, but it has everything to do with how you interact with humanity. And so the importance of a local friend to me has always been at the forefront. And so not only did I have Amaz in Zambia, but I also had my friend in the background here, Mohammed, who helped me navigate the different complexities of street life, where there was one time when I was making a photograph in Jericho where a man became extremely upset with me, this young man. He was a teenager, and honestly, it was like the one time I ever had confrontation. It was only this one time. But he seemed to be a little bit crazy, and he was trying to stunt on me in front of some of his friends or something, and he wound up pulling the camera strap off of my neck. And so Muhammad and one of the elders in the community confronted the man and protected me in a way, because all of the elders, they trusted me and they respected me, and the younger men in the community, they are essentially always going to listen to the elders. And so because all of the elders in the community understood me and trusted me, they actually protected me and scolded the man and told him to go away and disciplined the man. And so I was able to diffuse this situation because of the community trusting me. So this is extremely important. And so I remember every morning I would knock on Muhammad's door, and he would also give me a tour, and we would walk around together, and we had a routine, and I got to actually document his daily routine inside of his home. And it was something that allowed for me to have a deeper understanding of the life in this village and the life in this area of the world. And ultimately, one morning when I came to him and showed him my camera strap being broken, and I didn't have any other camera straps with me, he actually helped me and he mended it. And you can see the child there with my camera in hand. After he fixed my camera with some tape or some sort of adhesive, we were playful, and I went back out there and made more photos. And so, the importance of a local friend is critical. And so we went on a long hike throughout the Wadi Kelt mountain range, walking along this river here. And me and Mohammed in the background that you just saw in the previous photo was along for the journey. And he showed me this beautiful place to hike. And him and his friend Amaz here were just hanging out. And I wound up making photos like this that are much more intimate. And so you can become a fly on the wall in certain scenes. And when situations unfold, you can actually capture these candid moments that I believe become stronger than just simply walking by and taking a picture and moving on, right? And so that's how this kind of approach becomes valuable. And so, yeah, ultimately there's something that occurs when you have this trust within a community, right? The photos become more impactful. And so by being authentic and understanding the subjects and the people that you're photographing, you can elevate this act of creating images and making street photos to something more than just taking photos, but you're becoming closer to life itself and uplifting humanity through the impact of the imagery. And so when I'm out there photographing, I'm very fluid with how I interact with scenes. I'm not necessarily just taking pictures and moving on. Once again, here in Napoli, hanging out with my brother on a vacation and chatting with these locals and swimming at this scene for many hours, right? I was just there, and after an hour or two of sunbathing and swimming, this scene unfolded naturally, and we were all enjoying the watermelon together and engaged at the scene. I was able to come home with a strong street photo. And so to me, the idea of blending street and documentary photography has everything to do with the approach and the aesthetics. And so the documentary technique of integrating yourself within a community and gaining trust and access is, to me, what it's all about. However, in order to come home with something more interesting visually, I believe that the aesthetics of street photography are something that we should uphold. And so simple ideas like not posing people, and simply remaining a fly on the wall when photographing, so that you can achieve that spontaneous nature within the photograph. And so you can ask for permission and have trust without having to pose photos, without having to, come home with something that's just like a portrait of somebody, right? When you think of a documentary photographer, you might think of somebody who's posing a photo or posing a portrait or coming home with certain type of imagery. But I believe that you can blend the technique and the approach of this documentary photography journey and combining it and blending it with the aesthetics of street photography through the spontaneous nature of capturing candid moments as a fly on the wall. And so that's how I achieved all of my photographs, is simply through the approach of gaining trust and then remaining a fly on the wall and capturing the candid, spontaneous moments through these meaningful connections. And so being there at the scene, being present, being mindful and being open and playful, you will ultimately have more opportunities to make strong street photos just through your body language, through your communication skills, and through the way that you are as a human, man. Like, that's what photography is all about, and your lust for life will reflect itself back in the photos. If you go out there and you're this serious documentary photographer with like 15 cameras on your neck and you're walking into a new community and thinking that you're going to make some great photos, I mean, good luck, man. Like, it doesn't have anything to do with your camera, your lens choice, how great of a photographer you are, really. These things aren't important at all, but your ability to interact with humanity is ultimately what's on display in the photographs that you make. And so for me, approaching the streets this way has become my game to play. And so I encourage you to create your own game and photograph your own way and figure out what works for you. And so my game is pretty simple, honestly. If I'm traveling to a new place, carrying an instant camera unlocks infinite possibilities. Building relationships and immersing myself in the community is ultimately what it's all about when it comes to documentary photography for me, and blending it with the street photography, right? So this topic, it's interesting. I think it's very nuanced. It's something that I just fell into naturally. I mean, it's something that it was necessity, really. I mean, if you're imagine you're getting started with street photography, right? And you're just getting started, but you're in one of the most dangerous neighborhoods in the country. How are you going to approach street photography? I mean, this was a necessity for me. And so I'm very grateful to have had that strife, because it ultimately led me to becoming a greater photographer. And so, yeah, street photography, it's actually very easy, but when you approach new places and you travel and you're engaged with new communities, it can become challenging. But through overcoming that challenge and going through that difficulty and understanding a few different techniques and way that you can approach humanity, hopefully you can come home with stronger images. And so to me, that's what it's all about. I've created everlasting memories throughout my journey of traveling and photographing with this approach. And so honestly, it just fuels me with so much joy and it makes me so happy. And yeah, I encourage you to think more about how you can interact with your community, even if you're in your hometown. I mean, you can use this technique, you can use this approach of engaging with humanity and engaging with community and simply come home with these memories. And despite where you may be, you can achieve these results in your own hometown. You can go out there and photograph in a number of different ways. And I think it's important to, again, play the game your own way and find what works for you. And so, yeah, hopefully something I shared with you in this video can benefit you on your journey as a photographer. Yeah, remember to just go out there and to be open, without any preconceived notions of what you will find. And ultimately, you'll be surprised. I think that, when you set your body in motion without any preconceived notions, you will come home with a better understanding of the world. Because when you go out there and you have all these ideas in your head about what to expect, and you have this preconceived idea of what kind of photos you want to make, you're going to find yourself stagnant. But if you just keep moving and you keep going out there and you keep engaging with life, you should hopefully come home with something strong, with something meaningful for you. And so, yeah, I just encourage you to go out there and to be open and playful, and to just not take yourself so seriously. As somebody who's been photographing in numerous communities throughout the world intimately, that to me is the number one takeaway for me. It's like, photography has nothing to do with photography. Photography has everything to do with how you are as a person and how you interact with humanity, and that will reflect back in the photography. That's it. That's what I believe.